It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Here's a few of these that I know financially might not be the best for your back pocket, but they sure are fun. And the first one, second homes.
Yeah, this one is so funny to me because this is one that I feel like so often people tell us this is an aspiration of theirs. They will know that they've finally made it when they're able to have that beach house or that mountain house or that second home or whatever the case may be. Rather than being like a symbol of not making good financial decisions, this is sort of the coup de grace of making good financial decisions, at least as far as Robin Leach would suggest to us.
And I will admit, I have fallen prey to this siren song. And I can share, I think that, remember, wisdom comes from experience. So it's good when you have some decisions that might not have gone well. I think I even talked about this one in our financial mistakes episode recently. But here's why these things are a siren song. Let me give you the brochure high points. Appreciating investment potential.
Yeah, it's real estate, right? So, in real estate, obviously
God's not making more of it unless you're in Hawaii. So that was my own little joke there at the end. Unlimited vacations.
Oh, if you own a second house, you can always go there. You're the boss.
Rental income.
Yeah, if you're only there part of the time, why don't you use that as a way to generate more income for yourself?
Tax deduction. What is not to like about sticking it to our favorite uncle?
That's the big one.
And then, Bo, you wrote this one. Access to different weather seasons.
Yeah, if you live up in the far north and you get like 22 inches of snow every winter, you may want to have that Florida beach house where you don't have to deal with that white stuff
I think
anymore.
they get more than 22 inches.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm from the south.
It's the south. 3 inches and we freak out down here.
True.
So that's why 22 sounds like a blizzard does. So let's talk about this from a hard data fact, because I think a lot of them, you mentioned Robin Leach, and he passed away not too long ago. Right. But if you're a child of the 80s or 90s, you know lifestyles of the rich and famous. Yep. And there's so many things that are put before us by the marketers and the industry, the cottage industries that are convincing us to consume, that we think the next decision you make in your path to success is probably doing something like this. But what do the actual numbers say for successful people? If you go look at Dr. Thomas Stanley's Stop Acting Rich book, this is the data he had on second homes. 64% of millionaires never owned a vacation home, a beach bungalow, or a mountain cabin.
So over one half of all folks chronicles millionaires.
More than 60%, 64%. And then listen to this. I thought this is why I kept this stat. This is from the first time we did this show. But I think it gives you perspective on what it got us into the real estate crisis of 2008 through 2011 was, and according to the National Association of Realtors, second homes accounted for 4 of 10 residential home sales in 2005. So that was before we had the downturn. And the typical home buyer was 52 years of age with a median household income of $80,600.
Wow.
That does not sound like somebody that ought to have multiple homes.
It does not sound like the profile of someone who should be diving into a second large real estate purchase.
I did, because when I see old data, I like to go see if I can find newer data. It was interesting for me to see that if you look, second homes only account for about 6% of the total real estate marketplace. What is interesting, though, Florida is a lot of it.
Yeah.
Florida, California. I mean, it was amazing. There was only a few states that
accounted for
half of second homes out there. So since you've seen the brochure high points of all the potential appreciation, the rental income, the tax deductions, let's get into the reality of the situation. And here's what I'll promise to sprinkle in here. I'll sprinkle in my own life experience in this a little bit too, so that you can hear the story and hear my woe tell on why you might need to be careful with this decision. So for a second home, let's talk about the buying.
Yeah, so obviously when you go to purchase any sort of real estate transaction, there are transaction costs associated with that. There are closing costs associated with it. And if you're not paying cash for the property itself, there can be financing costs. There's an interest charge if you're going to own this thing over a long period of time.
A real estate commission of 6%. Yep. I mean, the thing is, real estate is an illiquid asset. It is not something that you can get the whim of selling tomorrow and getting the cash. It just doesn't work that way. Right. Even in a good situation, it takes time to turn it back into cash. Furnishings. Here's the thing about furnishings. When I think about a bed or a couch, you're thinking I can get 7 years out of that, right? 7 and like
Yeah, I think
mattresses, 10 years is what they advertise on the TV. When you're with rental property, because the problem with rental property is nobody treats it like it's theirs. They treat it like rental property. So couches last at most 3 years.
Yeah.
Beds, if they don't steal, because you'll put a waterproof mattress cover, but they'll get stolen in the first year. So it goes 6 months where people are sleeping on it without the waterproof mattress cover. So you're replacing the mattress every 2 to 3 years. It's horrible how much it costs to get this secondary house decorated.
And I don't even think about, obviously if you have renters in there, you're gonna have to replace stuff. But I think, everyone I know, whoever has bought a lake house, and even if they weren't planning on renting it, they just wanted their secondary house, they didn't want it to be empty. They still wanted every room to be furnished, and they wanted to be decorated, and they wanted to look nice when people came over. It's hard enough just to do that stuff for your primary residence, and then you have to double that cost to be able to do it on a secondary residence. The price is certainly more than just what the sticker on the pamphlet says.
Maintenance.
Ooh, this is the one I think that you've gotten burned on the most, right?
It ties into the furniture, the turnover of the furniture. But then the other thing, because and you heard me say, a large portion of the secondary home market is in Florida. Mm-hmm. A lot of that is coastal. We all want to be near the ocean. There's this side effect of being near the ocean. All the air has salt in it. Mm-hmm. So everything corrodes a lot faster. You put a new light fixture on the back deck, it's corroding in just a few years. You put a heat and air system on top of the roof, because most is like a condo. Where are the heat and air systems?
It's got to go on the roof.
They're on the roof, so you have to hire a crane to pull this, which the crane is not cheap, right? To put it up on the roof. There's maintenance is a mess, and that doesn't even count the additional costs of utilities. Mm-hmm. Because you know what? Another thing about a rental property, nobody treats it like it's their own when they're paying for utilities too. They leave the doors open. They run the air conditioner
50-degree air conditioning.
They sleep 5 degrees colder when it's a rental property than they do at their own house. All that stuff adds up to ongoing costs. Commuting. This is the thing. I have an annual golf trip that kind of started on the back of going down to my vacation rental property to do annual updates to it.
Okay.
And then we'd play golf. That's how I'd lure some additional workers down there with me, is that we'd get a round of golf. Fortunately, now that we've gotten rid of the condo, we can actually focus on having fun. And that's the problem, I think, with secondary homes, is that, especially if secondary rental property that you think is in a vacation area, when you actually get to use it, you don't get to use it during peak times,
right?
Because you want the rental income. You end up using it during off seasons, and then a lot of times you're running around to Walmart, mattress stores. Yep. You're running around to all kind of things trying to keep up with the maintenance of it.
Well, and you make a point about commuting, that even if you are someone who maybe you live in the northern United States and you want that beach house in Florida, you're probably not going to drive down there. Every time you need to go for a repair or you do want to go experience it, there's additional travel cost, where maybe if you had a different option, just go somewhere closer to home that was driving, you wouldn't have to pay for plane tickets or whatever the case may be. So it's an expensive endeavor just to get back and forth to your vacation property.
And I probably have jaded this a little bit because of my own experience, because I've put this in there as more of a rental property than just a straight up secondary home. But I know with renting, because we all think that we're going to make more money from a rental property, the management company takes a huge cut.
That's right.
I mean, they're usually the ones that are coming out on the peachy end of the whole transaction. And then when you do get tired of it, I know we had a lot of trouble. We had one of the owners of my condo, they just changed life. There were some marriage changes going on, so they decided they wanted to get out of it. So we all decided we went out. It's hard to sell. Yep. I mean, it just took a lot longer to sell than we thought. And once again, you're facing transaction, real estate costs, and all kind of other things that you just didn't count on. And then let's get back. I want to kind of close this out to that fool's gold of the tax deduction. Because I hear so many people think, I'm going to do rental property because I'll get a great tax deduction. And everybody hears, because there's articles all over the place that say that you can deduct up to $25,000 a year from your rental house. The problem is, as soon as you make $100,000 of income up to $150,000, that deduction completely phases out.
So you don't even get to take it every year when you get it.
You don't get to take it. It just sits there and accrues every year and essentially taunts you when you do your taxes until you actually liquidate that holding. So all of these losses are just building up in the background.
So not only are there transaction costs, and is it sometimes expensive to get out of or even difficult to get out of, you don't even receive the tax benefit if you're a higher income individual until you actually are able to complete that transaction.
So a lot of people are then probably thinking, well, that's okay. I'm going to get a lot of personal use out of this property. Problem is, if you use the property for more than 14 days a year, you jeopardize some of the deductibility of all those expenses that I just talked about. Yep. So you can see that this thing is wrought with tons of booby traps and things that you have to be somewhat careful with. The advice I always give people is that the money is not made on the actual renting of the property. If you truly go get into real estate, I think this is true with all real estate. It's all in what you paid for it on the purchase price. So if you got in at a really, like all the people who probably bought in 2009, 2010 during the market collapse probably did okay because the purchase price insulated them on the intrinsic. It's all back to Warren Buffett's intrinsic value discussion. The problem is if you're doing it for a cash flow, it's not going to work. But here's what does work. If you have a friend, if you have a relative that owns a beach condo, it's awesome to go use their beach condo.
I think about a lake house, someone who has a lake house with the boats and the jet skis and all the toys. It is fantastic to get to reap the rewards and reap the fun and joy of that if you're not the one who has to foot the bill on it.
I'm still reading Jonathan Clement's book because we're going to have him on in not too distant future. And he talks about how it also creates a boring vacation because you're going to the same place every year when you buy your vacation home. Now, I will tell you that actually garnered a lot of negative comments on Twitter when he published that because there are people that said that they built a lot of childhood memories and other things from going to a family homestead. Right. But to each his own. If you want variety, you probably don't want to own a vacation home.
And we live in a world where there are some great alternatives to actually being home. Because we say this all the time, Brian, instead of going out and buying a second piece of real estate at the beach or in the mountains, add up how much it's going to cost for you to carry that every year. You could pay for some pretty nice vacations with that annual expenditure you're going to spend on owning the property. And with things like VRBO now, Airbnb, it's not as difficult as it once was to get to the beach pretty cost effectively.
My buddy who does all the organizing for that golf trip that I used to do for maintenance on my condo, for the last probably 4 years actually, we've used VRBO and HomeAway, which are owned by the same company. You know, they're the same ownership. Get some beautiful. We don't even do condos anymore. We do houses that are pretty close, walkable distance to the beach, and it's cheap because it's kind of off season when we go do this golf trip in the early spring. So it's a lot cheaper. I get to split this with everybody that goes on the golf trip, which is a real sweet deal for me. When I was taking everybody down there to play golf, I was paying for it. Because think about it, that beach condo was my beach condo. You were covering it, So I was covering that to a large degree. So it's much better it's a very healthy alternative to consider renting somebody else's vacation rental.